very constrained by it myself, because I feel like, I mean, technology is not it's helping, but it's not helping in some way. So I'm just going to begin, regardless, because I can't, really wait any longer. So you get what you get, and that's what it is. Okay, can I begin? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وعليه وسلم. وأما بعد، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب مبين بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحياتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Their call is Subhanaka Allahumma, glory be to you, O Allah. Their greeting is Salam, peace. And the end of their call is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. History as such is not an exact science. And it is always, as I've made clear in previous talks, it's always written by the winners. The winners are the people who write history, not the losers. This is losers' history. As the last two talks on Nasser Khusro and Hassan Sabah have been, this is the history of losers. They've lost. And it's very hard to find this history. It's not easy to find the history because it's buried or it doesn't exist. And in two cases, the places where it was stored were burned down by the very same people who were opposed to it, which will, in the course of things, will be clear. So we say it's not an exact science. And it is always written by the winners rather than the losers. And the telescope that we look through it, because we're sitting here looking back like 700-800 years on top of it, right? What we see is more like a kaleidoscope, shifting colors and shapes and patterns and things that happen, and who knows, in one account can do it justice or even pretend to report the feelings of what went on at that time, or the thoughts or the spiritual states of people. We assume a lot and we know a little. That's the fact of the matter, no matter what people say. 700 years pass, like, for instance, the thing that comes to my mind on this is a lot of this is derived from Fatimid thought. The Fatimid dynasty, the dynasty that lasted 250, 300 years. America is a little over 200 years old. We think that it's a big thing and nobody would ever forget America, right? I mean, big thing on the world stage, superpower, all of those things like that. The Fatimid dynasty controlled more land than America. It controlled all the way from North Africa, from the Maghreb, all the way to Damascus, all across the top of the Mediterranean and below it, because it originally was started by Berber people who lived just to the south, because the north of the Mediterranean, what's called North Africa, was composed by Arabs and people like that who had come that way on their way to going to Spain. And they had settled there in the course of things, over the course of the years. But it's like Tunis. If you look at Tunis, you compare Tunis and Mali. You see a big difference in the kind of people they are. So this dynasty was founded originally by a combination of people who were Arab people who had a particular view of things, and Berber people and they started this, and then they expanded eastward until they took Cairo, and then they took Damascus, and at one point they even held Baghdad, and Mecca and Medina and all of Sudan. That's not South Sudan left out, but including South Sudan. All of that, well, what's called the Sauda, a part of Africa called Sauda, was controlled by this for 300 years. And they had very advanced teachers, a very advanced way of looking at things, which I'll make clear, I hope, in the talk. Now, I was talking with a young lady like our sister here who was studying at the university, only she was studying to take her doctorate in Mideastern studies. And I mentioned these people to her at one point. And she said, but Baba, they're bad people. I said, they're bad people? How do you know? I said, well, that's what they say. This is a question of the people who write the history, you know, are the ones who say, so here's this young lady who is originally, or her family is from Southeast Asia, from India precisely, who's come here, who is studying her roots more or less, trying to comprehend what they are, what the Muslim world is, right? And the only thing she knows about this dynasty that lasted for 300 years and had very advanced teachings and teachers was that they're bad guys. That's all she knew. So what do you know about them? She said, I don't really know anything about them. So her teachers and her professors and all these people had never made any effort to talk to her about them. There was simply, all she had gotten out of it was somehow these Fatimiyun, as they were called, were bad people. Okay, so this is what I mean. It's very hard to write about things when, you know, this is what you're up against when you're writing about them. So let me go on. So I said we assume much and we know little. We know certain facts. There were certain dynasties. There were the Abbasids. There were the Umayyads. There were the Fatimids. There were, and so on and so on and so forth, until there were the you know, the Safavids, and there were the on and on and on. We know that. We know historically these things existed. And we know certain battles took place. That's recorded. And there were voyages by certain people, like we know Nasser Khusro left where he was. He went all the way to Cairo and all the way back. We know that because he left a book, Safarnama, about this, which tells the story of his travels. He made Hajj 3 times and went back, and he reports about many different things, not only his teachers, but he reports about towns that he visited and what kind of their fortifications were, how their water supplies were. So we can sort of know these things, right? And at the same time, but when we're talking about this, like when Sheikh Rashid was talking about all these things and so on and so on, he was deriving them from the poetry of Rumi, and also from some of what we have left of Shems's writings, which we do. We have a book of his writings. His writings, even though it's called Diwan al-Shams al-Tabriz, is not written by him, it's written by Rumi, right? So we have some of that, so we have some idea of what happened, okay? But we don't have much, except as Sheikh Rashid did, what he did is he recounted the poetry that these men had made, so because that we have. But how did what happened happen, right? Because here you have this man who's a very conservative, and his son of his father, and he emphasized that you know, they were a Sufi family. They weren't a Sufi family, exactly. They were like many people from Central Asia and Southeast Asia. They have a kind of interest in Sufism, or it's kind of inside of their thing like that, but it is not their main interest. In their case, these were fuqaha, and his father was a big faqih, and to the point that the ruler built a whole madrasa for him. And his son, and when his father died, as will become clear in the story, he took over that madrasa. So he was a very, you know, straight and conservative Sunni faqih. That's who he was, Rumi. And then he meets this guy, Shams. We'll talk more about that. And in 40 days, they spent 40 days locked in a room. 40 days is the time that people usually take to make a spiritual retreat. It's called a chilla. the Chilla in Manila or something like that. But anyway, the rumble in the jungle, you know what I mean? Anyway, that's another story. But what happened was that in those 40 days, this man, his life was totally altered. So what my talk about is not his poetry. I'm not interested. I mean, I like poetry and so on and so, but I'm not talking about his poetry or anything. What happened to him? How did that happen? How did that happen? And today, this is a very important issue. And why is it an important issue? Like we're having this talk now. It's the month of Muharram. The month of Muharram is, after Ramadan, the most sacred month of the year. Muharram means, it comes from the word haram, and it talks about certain things that are totally impossible for a Muslim to do in this month. Impossible. And one of those things is fighting. And here we are, we all know the news, we read the news, we hear the news and like that. And here are all these Sunnis and Shiis, quote unquote, who are fighting and killing each other. So something's wrong. And anybody who doesn't think there's something wrong really better look at things again. Something is very, very wrong. And the fact of the matter is, when you go back and you look at the history, this has happened before, but it's really virulent at this time. So what does it mean that a man says, I'm a faqih, I'm a teacher of, religious studies, I teach all of these things and so on and so on and so on and so forth like that. Many of these same people are involved in killing each other every day nowadays, or at least turning the other way. Or you see pictures of this Bashar al-Assad, and you see the on one side this big sheikh and that big sheikh, and the ulama not saying anything. They become priests. This is what we're faced with today. So we have to change. Not that I'm saying that we have to change like Rumi, or that's going to happen, but something has to change in the way we are. Not only us people just sitting here, but across the Muslim world. Something has to change. And you don't find, when you look at all of the Sufis doing this thing, you don't find that. They're not involved in that. This is not their way. Their way is, as the Sheikh talked about, love and peace and justice and mercy and these things. This is the essence and basis of their teachings. Peace and then justice, because there's no peace without justice. That's what we see from Palestine. Those people will never make peace because there's no justice. The people are not treated justly. And there's no justice without mercy. Because there has to be mercy for there to be justice. Because you have to look at things, because things are different. It's not just like one law, cut the guy's head off or chop his hands off or something like that. You have to know what's the story. Like when you look at Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and how he judged during his caliphate like that, he would take an interest in what actually happened, what went on, and make his decision based on that. So that's mercy. So the mercy does the justice. But where does a person get mercy from? A person gets mercy from having love. There's no love, there's usually not much mercy, right? And what then? Freedom. So like what we saw in Egypt, freedom is gone. There's no freedom now. There was no freedom when the Ikhwan were there. There was no freedom when Mubarak was there. There's no freedom. So these other things can never happen, really happen across the society. And so we have failed societies all across the Muslim world, from Nigeria to in the islands, Indonesia, all the way across this failed Muslim societies. And we used to say, oh, it's the British, oh, it's the French, oh, it's the Belgians, oh, it's the colonists, oh, it's the this, that, and the other thing. But we're in control. Everywhere there's a Muslim president, there's there are Muslim courts, Muslim everything like that, and we failed. So something is wrong. And as soon as we will admit that something is wrong and try and bring about the change, then maybe something will happen. But until then, it's going to be the same old, same old. So I chose this story because it's not just a story, it's about how a man's life was changed. What made it change? As I say, it's not about the poetry. You can read the books. I suggest you read the books, you know, and like that is the beautiful poetry and everything. But that's not what I'm trying to talk about. What I'm trying to communicate with you all is this idea of how does a person change? What is the apparatus? He talks, like Sheikh Rashid was talking about, you know, this man was changed and he became this, that, and the other. He didn't tell you, how did he change? What was the mechanism of change? What brought about that change? So that's the object of the talk that I want to do today. That's what I really want to talk about, inshallah. I mentioned three, and also please, you know, if you can't get it today, go to our website in time and get the written talk, because you know there's a difference between the spoken word, because I'm speaking to you and I change what I'm saying to speak to you or to speak to the people here on the video cast, whatever like that. And I write, and the two things, the written word and the spoken word, are not the same thing. So to really understand this, if you want to understand this after listening to it, please go to the website. It'll be ready in a couple of weeks. There'll be you know, one of our usual books like this will, in this size or smaller, will be available. And please, if you're interested in the subject, read it carefully, because it's not about something that happened a long time ago or that like that. It's about what are the mechanisms to change, because if things don't change, and that's just like our Muslim world, because there's another whole world about the world of climate change and economic things that are happening as a result of that, and the change of, like, Europe is becoming an African country, you know, or African continent, because of the droughts and the things like that. The whole world is changing, and it's changing big time, you know. And we have to be, those of you who are parents and you have children, you have grandchildren, as I do, you know, it's not only thinking for ourselves. We got to think about our kids and those who are coming. And there are big changes coming. They estimate 5 billion people are going to die as a result of this climate business. 5 billion people. There's 7 billion people living today. If people were to live like the people are living in America, you need 3 worlds to support them, right? The people of India, they want to live like we live here. The people of China, they want to live like we live here. The people in Russia, they want to live. Everybody wants to live like we live here. But we would have to have 3 worlds in order to make that possible, and that ain't going to happen. So everybody's got to take a cut. There's no way around it. And these politicians, they talk and they blah, 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 and this, like that, and the other thing. But they have no incentive to change, none whatsoever. So this question of change is not an abstract thing for people. It's very crucial to understand that the situation on every level has to change. And that people have to, you know, things that you took for granted, like you get on an airplane and you go someplace. Yeah, it's become commonplace. I mean, like when I was a kid, I didn't fly in an airplane till I was 24, 25 years old. People didn't fly in airplanes. It was a big deal, you know. I was like for high people to fly on airplanes. And then everybody flies in an airplane now. But it's going to go the opposite way. And like, as I tell my grandchildren, you know, you'll be lucky if you get on a plane. Never mind, there's not enough leg room. You know, you won't even be able to afford to get on the plane, because they can't afford the oil that has to run the plane. Where's it going to come from? So everything is changing. And so some of us are old, like I'm an old guy. So like, you know, I'll be dead and, you know, it's not my problem, but I have children and I have grandchildren and I have great grandchildren. It's going to be their problem. So I'm very vitally interested in this question of change. How can we change ourselves so that we can face that like a different life? We have to face a different life. It's not going to be this way. And it may not be that here's the father of the son. The son is sitting here. He's half asleep. Wake up. Yes, thank you. Right, right. Because his life is not going to be the same as his father's life. And if he has children, this children's life is not going to be the same as their grandpa's life. It's not going to be. It's not. And you have other sons and daughters, and they have children. So you have grandchildren. You know what I'm talking about. This is the situation. This is what's facing people, and we've got to face this. We can't, say like right now we can say, well, Ebola is over there somewhere, like that. Suddenly it's here. It was there. Now it's in Texas. Well, there's in New York, or the girl lands in the airplane, or whatever. I mean, you've got to understand what's happening is affecting all of us, and it's going to affect all of us. And we have to learn how we're going to change our lives to fit, because it's not going to change. The temperature is going up, it's going up, it's going up. There's nothing we can do about it at this point. It's like a huge ship. You can't just turn a ship around like this. You turn it around like this, and it takes a long time to turn it around, right? And the people don't say, oh, no, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to happen. And, I mean, there's islands now where the water has gotten up to the point where it's licking at their doorsteps, like in Venice or in South Pacific. It's a real phenomenon. So that's what's inspired me to write it. I want to say that I've been trying to tell this story for about 5 months. It's taken me 5 months to write this. And many things came in different ways my way, and not the least of it is I'm suffering from some strange sickness, and which is not unusual considering I'm 76 years old, but it sapped my energy. It took my energy away from me. And it kept me from doing anything very much except going and giving the khutbah on Friday, coming here on Sunday nights and like that, answering the sick and needy people who call and so on and so forth, just simply because of my position, not because of me, but because of my position. That's something I have to deal with. But it's been hard to do it because this is my situation. This is, this is how I am at this point. So it's very hard. And also, when I read this, I realize how big when we're talking about change, we're not just talking abstractly. It means that we've got to change ourselves. And when I look at it, it's daunting to think about it. It's really like, it's like a huge mountain right in front of your face. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Well, maybe I can see how I'm going to do it. But, even like when I'm talking about children, some of my children have no idea, it's very hard for me to tell them about it. They just say, oh, come on, like climate change, what are you talking about? They're still listening to, CNC or whatever it is, like, I don't know what the names of these television stations are. They say, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense, that, like the politicians say, that's not happening. They told Obama, they told Bush, you got to cut, by 30, 40%, your use of hydrocarbons. But don't you want to get your order from Amazon the next day? Everybody wants to get their order the next day. Everybody, how is it going to get there the next day? You go down the road, you see those big trucks going down the road. You go into the supermarket and you look at all the stuff in the supermarket. How does it get there? There's 100 different kinds of cereals, for instance. There are. And they're filled up, and they're doing so. There's people up there stocking it every night. That's going to change. A box of cereal is going to be $5, $6, $7, because that's what it's going to cost to put it there. And people say, this is not worth it. Let's just have 2 or 3 kinds of cereal. That'd make things much more simple. And so, these are the kind of things that we're talking about. This is down to that level. What you eat for breakfast, what you eat for lunch, what you eat for dinner, all of that, like, where does that fruit come from? How did it get to your table? How much did it cost to fly it there from Chile? You eat plums in the middle of the winter. Where those plums came from Chile, because it's summer in Chile right now, right? They flew imagine that they flew a plum from Chile to Charlottesville, or wherever you happen to be living, so you could eat it. Even plums get to fly on the airplanes now. So this is the kind of thing that we're looking at, the kind of thing that we're looking at when I'm talking about change. In any case, even though I felt like this, I really wanted to finish this talk, inshallah. We had 4 talks on this. We always have had every year 5 talks. And then on top of it, Sheikh Rashid has had a sickness in his family. that has made him travel back and forth to Chicago, to the doctor in Chicago and back, not for him, but for a member of his family. And then very hard to get the dates to work together. And so things got put off and put off. And so anyway, now, alhamdulillah, it's still the same year. Alhamdulillah, it's still 2014. I had to get used to saying 20. Still, I haven't gotten used to it. Everything used to be 19 something, and now it's 20 something. But anyway, that shows you where I'm at. So this is still the year 2014, but it's a new Muslim year because we're in Muharram. So this is the last of one thing and the beginning of another thing, and we don't know how it's going to go after that, but we're going to try and do it some way or another, these Sunday talks. And the last talk that we were going to talk upon was this talk about Shamsi Tabriz, Qaddasallahu Sirruhu, and Maulana Rumi, Qaddasallahu Sirruhu. So this will be the end of that series of talks on the stranger. It started with Khidr, alayhi salam, and has gone through different people until it's reached to this. And I pray for your understanding and, by way of explanation of why it's taken so long to finish up what we started. Now, Bismillah. In recent years, in the English-speaking world, there's been this tremendous upsurge in this man, Maulana Rumi, both about his poetry, about his being, quote-unquote, a Sufi, and unfortunately, most of this has been sensationalist. These people imagined in these 40 days that they were in this room, these two men were in this room, they were engaged in homosexual activities and drinking alcohol. And they've put this publicly out. You can read it on the internet, you can read that. And as a result of that, a lot of people have been attracted to read Rumi who would have never read Rumi otherwise. But it's just sensationalist thing. This is not the kind of man he was. He was never like that before. He wasn't like that after. Shams wasn't like that before. He wasn't like that after. This is some, media, I don't know, or, the mores of the present world. Like I always tell the story, like when I was a kid, I would go with my grandmother. We sometimes would go to lawn parties because we lived in the country. And she'd come back and we said, boy, we had a gay old time. I said, yeah, it was really gay there, Gay meant happy and funny and frivolous and what you do on a Sunday afternoon, really nice playing. We play croquet on the lawn, all these kind of things. It was gay. But if I use the word gay today, it means something than if I used it 40 or 50 years ago. Words change, things change, meanings change. You see what I'm trying to say here. So when we call this guy a Sufi, most of the people, they talk about Sufi, they don't even know what Sufi is. It's just some word that they heard or something like that. And they're attracted because of these stories. They say, oh, you mean this? And I even read this one thing when I was doing research on it. What we got to do is we got to get Rumi out of being a Muslim, because that gets in the way. Because Muslims are bad people. We're scary people. We all have knives and guns and, like that. And it's not a good idea that he's a Muslim. Well, let's call him a Sufi. Okay, who knows what that means? We'll call him a Sufi. Right? But we're not going to talk about. You don't hear about Muslim. You don't hear about Rumi the Muslim, right? You don't hear about that. You hear about Rumi the Sufi, because that somehow it makes him kosher. I use that word advisedly. Anyway, I don't share those views at all, any of those views, because I know it's not true. And indeed, I condemn those people who advance those views. I've refused to appear on panels where people who have that viewpoint would have been on that panel. I just refuse to take part in it because I don't want to associate myself with that. I find these ideas are totally spurious. These men, as I say, were men of the highest and most pure morals, and the clique of writers, contemporary writers, who advance such ideas should be considered in a strange way part of the general Islamophobia that all of us are experiencing at one level or another. If you haven't felt it, I don't know, maybe, you're living in a very benign place. But, I've been yelled at, I've been cursed, I mean, I don't know, because I look like this and I dress like this. I don't wear Western clothes, quote unquote. And, people look at you like this. They either want to run away or they want to beat you up. I don't know. There's a general Islamophobia that exists. If you are identifiably a Muslim, quote, Muslim. This word was invented by the British because they knew Muslim is like Mudhalim. And Dhalim is a person who oppresses people. So Muslim, Mudhalim, it's kind of the same. Instead of being Muslim, we're Muslim. Or they would call us, what is the word? Muhammadan, there was some word in India they used to use. Muhammadan people. Anyway. And the exact quote that I found on the net was, "It's too bad and it's unfortunate that Rumi was a Muslim." So, this tells you, just like what we're up against. So, and I don't know how far this will go, who it will reach or anything, but, I feel insulted when I read something like that. I feel insulted. As a Muslim, I feel insulted to read that kind of thing and those kinds of accusations and so on and so forth. So now let me go and tell you who were these guys? Who were they? As much as we can know, mindful that we're looking through this telescope of history that's turned backwards. It's not bringing things closer to us. It's very far away in the events, as much as I could find. And actually, let me tell you something else. I spent months researching this, and then I sent it to a friend of mine who knows quite a bit about certain things. And he wrote back to me and said, "No, you got the genealogy wrong. I thought these two guys were brothers. They're not brothers. One guy, Shems, is the uncle of a man who I thought he was the brother of, right?" And alhamdulillah, in this edition, I have some extra pages, like this here, that show this difference, because I'm going to take your edition back and I'm going to give you one of these because I don't want that being out in the world. Because I made a mistake, but it's very hard to dig down and get this. So I'm going to give you the best that I have, that I understand. Maulana Rumi's father, his name, as Sheikh Rashid reported, was Muhammad. He was the son of a man called Hussein Hatibi. He came from Balkh. Balkh is a part of what is now Afghanistan. It's another world at that time, right? So, but Balkh, when you see the word Balkh, this means he comes from that part, a certain part of kind of central Afghanistan, okay? A Persian-speaking part of Afghanistan, because in Afghanistan they speak Dari, and this is a derivative of Persian, right, which is Farsi. Farsi, Dari. It's a kind of low-level, Afghans would not like me saying that, but it's kind of a more street kind of language of Farsi, which is kind of a high language. Dari is like the slang language. Like in Arabic, we have Arabic and we have Amiya. In Cairo, if you speak in Fusha, when you go to order your coffee or something like that, or tea, the guy looks at you like you're talking Shakespeare's language or something like that. They speak Amiya because that's what the movies speak. I guess they have a filmi. They call it in India filmi. Filmi refers to Bollywood language, right? Right? Am I right? Filmi. So the same thing. And the Egyptian movies go all over the Arab world. So all over the world they speak Amiya, and they don't hardly speak Fusha anymore except when they read Quran. So I have this teacher of Hadith, and he'd recite the Hadith in the most beautiful Fusha. Then he'd come to give us his tafsir, and also in Quran. And this is when I was studying in Mecca. And he'd give us this thing, and his explanation would be Amiya. I mean, he could obviously speak both, but he chose Amiya in order to explain what he was saying, because that's what everybody understood. Right? This is an Arabic class, Arabic speakers, and this is what people understand. You got to talk to them in their own language, right? So here I'll give you what the Prophet said, who spoke this very beautiful, very elegant Fusha language, which the Quran is written in, the Hadith are in. But the people today, they don't speak that, they speak Amiya. Okay. So anyway, so he came from Balkh. And he was known as Bahadin Walid. Walid because they don't say Walid, it's actually Walid. But in Persian, W turns into a V. That's just the way it is. I think it's the same in Urdu. Yes, you do. You say Ramazan, things like that. There's a change. There are changes. It's Ramadan, but things change. And that's true in Persian too. So that was his name. But he's coming from a Dari-speaking people, and they speak a Persianate language. So his name, as we know it, was Hussein Habibi from Balkh, known as Bahadin Walid, who was given an honorarium because he was such a great scholar. He was called a Sultan al-Ulama. Sultan al-Ulama. This means the king of alams. Great mind. This title comes, let me tell you how he got this title. He had a dream, a ru'ya, in which the Prophet ﷺ was sitting and talking with his ashab, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, his companions, in a majestic tent that was set up on a battleground. And when Bahadin Walid comes, he approaches the presence of the Prophet ﷺ with the greatest of respect, obviously, and the Prophet ﷺ compliments him and shows him a place to sit on his right side, which is a place of honor. He sits him down, sitting next to him. And then he's talking, ﷺ is talking to the group, and he says, in our eyes, the Prophet speaking, ﷺ, Baha'u'ddin's value is very high. And from now on, I'm going to call him Sultan al-Ulama. This is the Prophet speaking, ﷺ, in his dream. He's having this dream, okay? So the next day, 300 students of his came to his school where he teaches, and they had something very important to tell him. And they narrated the dream to him. They had seen the same dream. They were astonished that they all had the same dream, and he had the same dream. And so from that day on, he was called Sultan al-Ulama. Because the Prophet ﷺ had called him that. All these 300 people had seen the same thing in their dreams. So he must be Sultan al-Ulama. So that was his name. He had a very wide breadth of knowledge, not only in fiqh and usuluddin and tafsir and so on and so forth like that, but he was a highly educated man. I mean, all of this area of the Persianate world, people really were involved in education at that time, learning and this was a very big part of their lives. And in addition, it was very well known, and you read many accounts of it. And when I'm studying on this, he used to do good for everybody. He abstained from evil acts. He lectured those about him, warning them in order to protect them from faithlessness and going astray. He was an eloquent orator, and those who listened to him became more committed in their deen. Like you give talks, you give khutbahs every week, right? Yeah, a lot of time you see a lot of people, they're sitting there like this. You see the words rolling off their back like water ducks. What you're saying, it doesn't matter what you're saying. You just don't, you're not, whatever it is, you're not yelling loud enough or something like that. You're not doing something that's waking them up from their sleep, and getting them to hear what you have to say. They're like that. This is the way it is. This is what the guy who stands there every week in front of you, this is what he faces. Sometimes there's a whole lot of people and they're all sitting there like this. And the people who run the masjid, they tell you, look, brother, you got 20 minutes, 25 minutes, don't go any longer than that. The guy's going to go back to work. Well, they don't got to go back to work because when you're finished, they're outside sitting around talking and like this. But anyway, you got 20 minutes to give them their dose of Islam for the week. and this is what you get. Anyhow, but he was so eloquent in his speech that everybody wanted to listen to him because what he said was so inspiring and woke them up, and like that. They're all sitting up like this, listening to what he had to say. Wow, like that, right? And he wasn't even a cowardly scholar. Like I mentioned this, like when Hosni Mubarak was president, you used to see the Sheikh of Azhar sitting here and the Mufti there. This man was a killer. He was a taker of bribes. He was a thug. He was all of those things. He started out as being a good Air Force general, and money, got him. And the Sheikh of Azhar knew it, and the Mufti knew it. And they said, zip it. Zip it. And the same in Iran, right? And the same in Pakistan, which calls itself a Muslim country only. The only three countries that call themselves Muslim are Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Iran. Same in Saudi. There's one people live at this level of living, and there's another people live at this level of living. And the war is going on against the people, our Arab brothers, off my mind, where the last war was. Huh? No. In Palestine. Gaza. So here's Gaza. How far is it away from Riyadh? Not far. They bought $62 billion worth of American armors. Could they help them, people? Every day there's things coming in like this. They're shooting off little rockets that are like something you shoot at a fair. And these other guys are hitting them with these huge, big rockets. Don't you think they would help their, quote, Arab brothers at least, and their Muslim brothers certainly? No, they're sitting there on their throne. That's the situation. So he was not a cowardly scholar in that he spoke like this. I spoke like this one time, and the representative of Sheikh of Azhar was sitting right there. I never got invited back again. Never. Because the people putting on the event, they wanted that stamp from Azhar that they were reputable and so on and so forth like that. And they don't want to hear about something like that. So there's a large part of the ulama's mouths are shut. They're not going to say anything about anything. But there are other people who will say something. He was one of these people. And as Sheikh Saadi said, talking to one of these rulers, he told him right in his face, you're a tyrant. And he'll ball him right to his face. Maulana Rumi's father said that Khawaram Shah's face, that the path he was on was not the face of Muhammad. The ruler, he told the ruler to his face, you're not on the path of Muhammad. That takes a lot of nerve to say that to a ruler. Right? He told him that. That's the kind of man he was. He was not a scholar who kept his opinions to himself because of fear. He never praised the sultans. He never lived in their palaces. He never took their money, and he never behaved like a hypocrite because of material gains, which we see among the ulama very widespread today. Therefore, the faithful people treasured him because, they could see what a man he was, as the Jews say, he was a mensch. He was a real man, not afraid of these people, And the people of the city of Balkh, which is in itself was a center of learning at that time, and gnosis, inner spiritual knowledge, showed him great love and respect for this man who could frighten the sultan, because the sultan lost face when he tells the sultan, you're not walking on the path of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And most of the scholars who could not appreciate him, they envied him and fitna, say bad things about him. But he never hesitated at all to express his opinions. And according to Aflaki, who was a scholar, Bahauddin's father, Hussein, the son of Ahmed Khatibi, was one of the best known scholars and virtuous of men of his time. I'm telling you all like this. This is the grandfather and the father of this man, Rumi. This is what he comes from. It's like the difference between who is that reprobate? who wanted to get Sidna Hussein alayhi salam to give him his bayat. Yeah, who? Yazid, right, Yazid, I should know, but I'm losing my mind, but that's okay. So, it's like that. I mean, it's clear, I mean, Yazid, what house did he grow up in? The house of Abu Sufyan, the house of Muawiyah, the house of Hind, who ate the liver of Hamza. I mean, how could he be the same as Hussein alayhi salam? There's no way, because you are who you live with in a certain way. I mean, you take in these kinds of things. So this is who it was that these people want to accuse of these horrible actions and so on and so forth. And at the same time, he was also back to Sheikh Rashid. He was he was devoted to Najmuddin Kubra, and in his khutbahs, he openly, because usually the ulama don't talk about this when they give their khutbahs and everything, they keep it to themselves, but he openly proclaimed that the scholars who were taken in by philosophy and reason and so forth were not following the way, and he himself was very deeply involved with the teachings of Najmuddin Kubrawiyya. And the scholars did not agree with him, and they turned the Sultan against him, and he had already said bad things about the Sultan. And in the meantime, the naib of Najm al-Kubra was killed and thrown into the river, like it's happening in Mexico today, and so on and so forth. And so on and so on and so forth. What happened? He migrated from Balkh. He had to leave. It just was impossible. It was too hot to live in Balkh for him. And so he went there from there, and he moved to a town. Well, first of all, he went. His way of getting out of it, he was going for pilgrimage, and he stopped over in Baghdad and so on and so forth like that. And he wound up living in around, actually in the beginning, south of a town called Konya, which is in a southern part of Turkey. This is where he made his life, because it was just too hot to live there. And how old was Rumi when this migration started? It's not known for true, but his date of birth is usually giving as 1207, based on his statements in Fihi Ma Fihi, which Sheikh Rashid talked about. It is what it is. I agree with that translation. And so his actual birth date was probably around 1200, and they didn't leave for the pilgrimage until 1221. So we could say he's around 21 years old when he has to leave everything that he's used to and make Hajj and wind up living in this new town of Konya. So he comes to this new town of Konya. Also, he stopped off at Nishapur. And why is that important? Because there he met Farid ad-Din Attar, the great mystic, and who was also a disciple of the Kubrawiyya sheikh called Sultan, as was Sultan al-Ulama. And so they said about them, their meeting was Maraj al-Bahraini al-Taqiyan. They were like two seas meeting one another like this. And anyway, Farid ad-Din Attar, he saw something in Rumi, like her son. I saw something in her son when he was a little boy, and he's become, mashallah, a very spiritual young man. So, you can see something like Baji, she's like one person in the whole family, but there's nobody in the family like her. She's different than the rest of the family. This is what happens. Sometimes there's one child who will be more spiritually motivated than the other child. And Attar saw this in the young Rumi, who was about 16, 17 at the time, and he gave him a book of his poetry, which was called Asrar Nama. And he kept this book, little book like this. He kept this book with him all of his life. And he was very touched by this meeting with Attar. But other than that, he was not really very mystically oriented. He was, as I say, he was a straight middle of the road alim, son of an alim, grandson of an alim, who had a Kubariya, from Najmuddin Kubra affiliation. but it wasn't like, that was the thing of his life. The thing of his life was teaching fiqh and teaching all of these subjects of the deen of Usuluddin. It's called Usuluddin. So that's what he was. So that's who Rumi was. And on the course of this thing, his father stopped in Baghdad, and the Khalifa of the time was the Khalifa of the time, because the Fatimids were finished by that. He sent him 3,000 golden Egyptian dinar. 3,000 Egyptian golden dinar. That's like, $100,000, something like that, or $75,000. He sent this huge amount of money. And he said that, when he received this money, he said, I'm not going to accept it because it's unlawful and dubious money. So this is the kind of person he was. And then they wanted him to stay in the king's palace in the seat of government. And what he did, they even came out to his caravan, and the Khalifa got off his horse, which is a thing to show respect to him, and so on and so forth, and wanted him to stay. And he said, no, I'm going to stay in the madrasa. I just sleep in the madrasa. He wanted him to come and stay in his palace. He said, I'll stay in the madrasa. But this is the kind of a guy he was, right? This kind of a human being he was. The best of kind of human beings. And his son took in his father's footsteps. This was the Rumi that Shamsuddin met. And if you get the booklet, there is a lot of detail about all of that. But the main thing I want to explain clearly to you is that this was a man of the utmost correctness and purity and noble person. And his father was noble, and his grandfather was noble. All of them were on the same wavelength. So all of these stories, dismiss these stories. And if anybody ever tells you stories like that or anything like that, please tell them what I've told you, that this is not at all the truth, and it couldn't be the truth, and it isn't the truth. Alhamdulillah. So then he went on again, and he wound up in this town south of Konya, and it's called Larend. And the Sultan of Larend, Amir Musa Bey, was a wali of Allah. He was also Sultan, and he was really excited that this king of the scholars was coming, and he told him he wants to come stay in his palace again. But as he said, again, I just want to go stay in the madrasa, not in the palace. It's not my thing. And that was accepted. But what the king did, the Amir did, he ordered a new madrasa to be built in Konya for this great wali and scholar. As just as instead of giving him all that money, he built this madrasa. Everybody would benefit from that, right? And the Sultan of the scholars, alhamdulillah, was very happy with this, and happy with Amir Musa, who was a wali on top of it. And the people liked Bahauddin, and his sermons every week were a source of great benefit and faith. And Rumi is growing up in this. He's coming every week to listen to his father's khutbahs and everything like that. That's what he grows up in. That's his birth. That's his inheritance from his father and from his grandfather, like that. And he himself also took some trips to Damascus, where he did some more studying under other shayukh and stuff like that. So he was really well taught and deeply versed, and was just like his father and his grandfather in following that path. And by that time, Bismillah, the Sultan al-Ulama, Bahauddin Valid, was 85 years old. And he had been in the new madrasa for 2 years, and he became ill in the winter of 1231. On the morning of the third day of his illness, he closed his eyes to the world. Now, mainly you find among the awliya of Allah, they don't take long to die. They not take months and months and months to die. They go in the hospital and then they're dead, like that. I know with my sheikh it was like that. I know the sheikh of Azhar, the old sheikh of Azhar, it's the same way. He was there, he was there 2-3 days, and boom, he was gone, like that. You find this is very common among these people, that they don't have long illnesses like that. They just die like that. In any case, alhamdulillah, he passed, and they had a huge funeral for him, and the Sultan came, and the Sultan of the country came, and commanders and scholars and the shayukh all came to his funeral, and like that, because he had a place in the hearts of the people from the top level to the low level. So everybody like that. Anybody, as he says at one point, people of the sensitive hearts felt that they had become orphans because their spiritual father had died. This is a report that I read about him. That was their spiritual father. Now they were orphans. And the following thing is written on his tombstone: Allah is eternal. This is the resting place of our master, the high office of the law, the source of wisdom, the rejuvenator of the prophetic traditions, the remover of un-Islamic beliefs, the one loved and followed as an exemplary Muslim, a man of Allah, a learned man, one who practiced what he knew and believed in, king of all scholars, mufti of the East and the West, the value of the law and the religion, the Sheikh of Islam and the Muslims, Muhammad, son of Al-Hussein, son of Ahmed of Balkh. May Allah be pleased with him and his ancestors. He passed away here on the 18th day of the month of Rabi al-Akhir in the year 628 Hijri, in the late morning, and may Allah have mercy on him. So that's what the people of his city made a tombstone, and that's what they wrote about him. So that's his father. That's Rumi's father. That's his dad. That's what the people, that he didn't make that tombstone. The people of that city, that's what they thought of him, right? So you know, your name is a very ephemeral thing, right? And when you're dead, people trash you very easily. It's easy to trash you when you're dead. But these people had the highest of feelings for him, as I say, from the top to the bottom of the society. A year later, because of the family, they built a simple shrine of sun-dried bricks over his tomb. And the Seljuk vizier at the time, Nooruddeen Parvani, asked Rumi about building a larger shrine for his father with a big dome on it, appropriate for the glory of the king of the scholars. And Rumi said to the vizier Parvani, who was the big vizier, "Can you build a bigger and higher dome than the one encompassing the universe?" And the vizier says, "Well, no." And he says, "So don't bother to build another one," right? So that's the way his son felt about his dad. This is enough, adobe bricks, that's fine. That's all that dad needs, alhamdulillah. The shrine that we see, for those of you who have gone to Konya today, was built after Rumi's death, and it contains both his remains and the remains of Sultan al-Ulama, his father, who was also buried in the same place. Unfortunately, today it's like a museum. If you go to Konya, please go and visit Shamsuddin's tomb, which is only some half a mile away, and it's still a masjid and everything else like that. But when the coming of Ataturk and everything like that, they closed all the Sufi places. They closed that place down. Then they forced them to open it up because the people loved them so much, but they made it into a kind of museum. So it's kind of boring, and there's loudspeaker talks and everything like that. You don't feel the sacredness of it. But you just go to Shems's tomb and you'll feel it great. Anyway, so that's the background of all of that. And as I say in this thing, that there's much more stuff in the writing, but I wrote it with the hope that it will give the person who reads it an idea of who this man was. And who is Rumi? Who is this guy got changed? This is who he was. This is where he comes from. And as I say, I want to shut up those prurient writers and those fake corrupt scholars who would try to remove Maulana Rumi from the embrace of Islam and accuse him and his friend and teacher Shams of Tabriz of monstrous deeds that they subtly and not so subtly suggest and they are engaged in. And just to give you an idea of the low level of these people who profess, this one person, one of the principal translators of Rumi, calls up a friend of mine whose only connection with Persian is that his wife and his wife's mother are Persian, and asks him the meaning of the word ishq. Now, you're a Persian, Iranian. You know that everybody knows what ishq means, right? Common word. Everybody. This man is the professed translator of Rumi, but the guy who worked with him, who was a secularist, was sick, and so he was on his own. So he got stuck on this word, which you do when you're translating. So he calls up this other guy and he asks him up, what's the meaning of this word, ishq? Well, ishq means spiritual love. Everybody knows that. So how is this guy translating Rumi? It's impossible. I mean, if you don't know that, it's like saying you don't know the word goodbye, or hello. Everybody knows what that means. I mean, I'm translating this book and I came across this word, it says hello. What does that mean? Hello? Hello. Hello. Okay. So that's that. And I think everybody now gets all of that. I don't have to go on more about that. So I want to come now to Shams Tabriz. Now here again, the same thing happens. Bismillah. And here is the place where I was wrong about the genealogy, but I'll correct it in my talk, inshallah. Wikipedia says about him, and I also mentioned that at the beginning of this thing, that I could have never written this thing without the internet. And especially some of these sites of the Fatimiyun and the Tayyibis and the Ismailis are very, very informative and very helpful to counter that. They've sifted through history and tried to give you another picture of it. So in any case, Wikipedia, which is a great institution, the man says, I want to make a place where you can find all the knowledge of the world. And Wikipedia started out rather small. But I mean, today you can type in things and you get answers back on almost anything, and it's free. I mean, I send them a pittance every year, as a donation. I suggest anybody uses the internet, please send them something, $5, $10. It doesn't have to be more than that, but something, because they have done a tremendous favor for mankind, because I would have had to go to find out these things all the way from my home out in Keene to come to Alderman Library and go through all the library and go through the book and get it out of the book and all of that stuff. And here I'm able to sit out in my house, go online and get this thing. That is a great blessing for anybody who's involved in scholarly work. So thank them for that. In any case, they say about him, he was a Persian. This is to show you how far, though, the misinformation goes. He was a Persian Muslim and a wandering Sufi Darwish. This is quote, credited with being the spiritual instructor of Maulana Jalaluddin Muhammad Balkhi, also known as Rumi, and is referenced with a great reverence in the works of Shams Tabriz, the Divan or Diwan of Shams Tabriz. And he taught him in seclusion behind closed doors in Konya for a period of 40 days, end quote. That's what Wikipedia says, just the general thing about him. Persian Muslim, wandering Sufi Darwish, spiritual instructor, and referenced with great reverence in Rumi's poetic collection, Diwan Shams Tabrizi. Okay. So this meeting of 40 days, what this bayan, or this talk is really concerned about, I have to give you now, like I gave you, all understand now who Rumi is, pretty much, right? You know kind of where he's coming from, what kind of a man he is, what his background is, who his father was, and so on and so forth. Here, I make a mistake, but I'll rectify my mistake, inshallah, today. So, but again, it's not that I didn't find it someplace. I found it someplace, but they had it wrong. Anyway, in a work called Manaqib al-Arafin by Aflaki, names a certain Ali as the father of Shams Tabrizi, and he says that his father was Malik Dad, and he based this calculation on Haji Bakhtash's Wali's Maqalat, which means conversations. And Aflaki suggests that Shams arrived in Konya at the age of 60 years. Okay, but other people, they question Aflaki. You'll find 10 different accounts or more. According to this Aflaki, Shams received his education in Tabriz and was a disciple of one Baba Kamal ad-Din Jumdi, who before meeting Rumi traveled from place to place, Shamsuddin, weaving baskets and selling embroidered belts for a living. And despite his occupation as a weaver, he was called an embroiderer, which is Zardouj. Zardouj? Embroiderer. No? Okay. Persian expert doesn't agree. In various biographical accounts. And his occupation is listed by Haji Bektash Wali in the Maqalat as that this was an epithet given to actually to the Ismaili Imam Shamsuddin Muhammad, about whom we'll speak more about later, who worked as an embroiderer while living mainly in the anonymity of Tabriz. Now, I have to tell you also at this time that where Shams is, well, I know, I'll come to it in a bit. Anyway, that's the reference in the thing, in that particular thing of Aflaki. He says that. Another version says Shams Tabriz was from a Nizari Ismaili family from Azerbaijan. His father was a da'i, meaning a caller. And I'll talk more about that later too. And Sayyidina Shams Tabrizi was raised to become a da'i like his father. But while in his late teens, he saw something and learned something that made him realize that the truth was not what he was following, and he became a Shafi, Sunni. And he studied Shafi fiqh and other sciences of Islam, especially tasawwuf and the science of the heart, and he disappeared into the wilderness of Western Iran, Eastern Turkey, and the Caucasus in Northern Arabia, and was never heard from again. That's another story. Another story says he was born in the 1180s in the Christian calendar in Tabriz, and during these years it is said that he lived with a group of 70 ascetic saints living in Tabriz. As you know, 70 is a word used by Arabs in Balaga to mean a whole bunch of people. Sabain. I mean, a lot of people. And he trained with a man, a sheikh by the name of Hazrat Selabaf for some time. And he quickly excelled, and he wanted to gain greater perfection. He went out seeking the awliya of Allah on his own. So these are stories. This is who supposedly he is. This is not who he is. After leaving, according to all of these accounts, after leaving Tabriz, he traveled through many places: Baghdad, Damascus, Aleppo, Kayseri, Aksari, Sivas, and Erzurum. And he traveled hidden from the people, and constantly striving to guard his miracles and mysteries, because he had come to have authority. It's like, you remember Musa alayhi salam. Remember Musa had a stick, right? And he threw the stick on the ground and it became a snake, right? Threw the stick on the ground and it became a snake. That's what's called authority. You can take a stick and throw it on the ground and say kun, and it becomes a snake. If you can do things like that, you have authority. Right? No matter how young you are, how old you are, anything like that, you can do that. If if there's no water in this glass and you want some water and you squeeze the glass. One time I saw a guy who came, I was riding with the sheikh in the car, and he came. In Egypt, there's these guys who sell Yasin. They sell Yasin. Every car that goes by, they come with Yasin. They give it to you free. But of course, they want something for it, right? You usually give him like some coins, right? So the sheikh gave him some coins. The man threw the coins back on the sheikh's lap. He says, "Do you think that's all Yasin is worth?" Sheikh looked at him like that. And the sheikh was very parsimonious in his ways, but he was also very attuned to people. This guy took this money when he gave him 65 cents or 70 cents worth of coins. He just threw them back on his lap. I was sitting next to him. He said to the sheikh, "Do you think that's what Yasin is worth?" So the sheikh gives him a pound. Right? Now a teacher makes 72 pounds a month. So a pound is not nothing in Egypt, right? So he gives him a pound. Guy crumples it up and throws it back on his lap. You think it's only worth a pound? So now the sheikh is becoming very interested in this guy. He's training me, saying, "This guy is really, he's really something, man. What's he on about, So he says, "All right." So he reaches in and he takes out his wallet, and he keeps it, covered up, and he takes down. He gives the man 5 pounds. The guy throws it back on his lap again. He says, "You think that's all? You think that's all Yasin is? 5 pounds? That's almost, that's like 3 or 4 days work. I mean, for somebody." And he says, "Look, let me show you something." He says to the sheikh. He says, "Give me your pen. Give me your pen." So first the sheikh thinks he's trying to rob his pen or something like that. So he gives him his pen. Takes it out of his pocket. He gives him his pen. Turns it upside down like that. His pen, the sheikh's pen, not the guy's pen. The guy has nothing to do with this pen. He takes the sheikh's pen and he squeezes it like this. And out of the bottom of the pen comes rose water. That's authority. Or maybe he had something hidden in his hand. We don't know. But it looked like authority because he's squeezing this pen and we see this rose water coming out. I'm sitting there, I'm watching it, right? The sheikh is so blown away by this, he gives him 20 pounds and drives away. He says, whoever this guy is. Another time I was with another sheikh, I was in India, and this guy comes up to the sheikh and he says, "Do you want to know the meaning of the mystery of life?" That's really something. This was in, I think it was in Delhi. It may have been in Bombay. I don't know. He says, "You want to know the meaning of life?" He's a darwish. And the sheikh said, "Yeah, like that." And he says, "Okay." He says, he has this little, like a taweez bar, those little metal things that they put taweez in. So he has this little locket like thing like that. So he says, "Here." He says, "Okay." He says, "This is 10 rupee. And, you can buy one of these on the street for like 1 rupee, So we give 10 rupees. He says, "No, I don't think so." And he walks on. So the guy comes after him again, taps him on the shoulder and says, "You want to know the mystery of life?" He stops again. He says, "Here, it's in here. Open this up, you'll find it. It's in here." He says, 100 rupee. So the price is, and this goes on 2 or 3 times, and then the sheikh becomes very interested in what's in this box. He tells me, "Run back to the hotel and get my wallet," because he's willing to now give him 500 rupees, to get the mystery that's in this little thing. By the time I got back there with the money, the guy had disappeared. But anyway, there are things like this, I mean, who knows what was in the box? Who knows what was in the pen? Who knows what was in Musa's stick? But he turned it into a snake, right? And that's authority. And Shems had authority. He could do things. And everybody could see that he could do certain things. And so anyway, like I say, like the written thing, the spoken word and the written word are not the same. There's none of these stories inside this book. And anyway, he went there, and one man, I read an account of one man who met him on one of his journeys. He said, "I've seen many special darwishes, and I spent time in their company. Though what they say and through the behavior, the true ones are distinguishable from the impostors. My meek heart will not incline to them unless they are extremely praiseworthy and special, nor will this bird peck at every seed." This he was talking about Shems. He was a very special man. So that's how he was regarded. But he was looking to find, when he was asked, what was he looking to find? He was looking to find, quote, "that saintly and spiritual companion." He says in his book, "I implored Allah to allow me to mix with and be a companion of his friends, the awliya, because I had a dream and I was told, 'We will make you a companion of a great wali.' And I said, 'Where is this wali?' And the next night I had another dream, and it said, 'He's in Rum.'" Rum is Anatolia. Rum meaning Rome, because it was part of the Roman Empire at one point. And after a while I had another dream, and I was told, "It's not yet time. All of these things come in the fullness of time." This is in his book, Maqalat. Elsewhere he states, he says, I can talk to myself, I can talk to anyone with whom I see myself, but I want somebody from my own type to make into my Qibla, the direction you pray facing Mecca, and turn to, for I am tired of myself. Do you understand what I mean? I'm tired of myself. And then, having turned into a Qibla, he would understand and comprehend what I'm saying. This is in Maqalat. But this is still not Shemsa Tabrizi. There's yet another story of who he was, where he came from, and it is this story that I believe is closest to the real truth, and it is this story that I will now try to tell, inshallah. And I'm supposed to stop at 3 o'clock, and it's 5:03 for us time to pray. It's time to pray as they come in. Yes, so we will pray, inshallah, in 5 minutes fast. But anyway, you want to hear another interesting story for the 5 minutes? I got 5 minutes left. The organizer of the talks is giving me another 5 minutes. I don't know. I don't have many. Well, anyway, well, let's see what it says. No, this has to be, this story I have to tell you from the beginning. This is the story of who Shems really was. And, once you hear this story, I'm sure the whole thing will be very different for you. This is not poetry. See, Sheikh Rashid told you about the poetry, about love. I haven't mentioned the word love except once or twice, I think, And I haven't told you any poetry or anything like that. I just tell you who people are to get an idea of who these men were. So if you see this name Rumi, if you want to read about poetry and you hear this name Rumi, you know now who Rumi, you have much better idea of who he was. If you're interested in poetry, right or wrong? You have a better idea of who Rumi was? Hello, people out there in whatever it's called, webcast land. Do you have a better idea of who Rumi was? I hope so. Otherwise, I wasted my breath. Alhamdulillah. Fatiha. Ameen. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Okay, we got to fix the chairs. How much do we have here? Slow reader. How much time do we have here? Yeah, 15 minutes. And be back. And hear about who Shems had been. Am I keeping your attention or am I boring you? Putting you to sleep?
It's interesting.
Interesting? You think it's interesting? Good. Okay. Because I don't know, I don't want to bore you.
You're not boring us.
No, and interesting. Yeah.
I looked up that thing. That's Zarduz.
What?
Zarduz. Broider.
Yeah.
Broider. At the end, it's not SH. It's not shit. It's Z.
Zed. I have Zed here. Zaraduz.
Zarduz.
Yeah, I must be mispronounced.
That's right. That's what I.
Zaraduz is what I have written.
Zarduz means somebody who has a gold on his shoulder. Zarduz is the one who's weaving, like very delicate.
Delicate embroidery. Yeah, that's what he used to do. He used to make these belts, I guess, for women. With the delicate.
That's what I got confused.
Zaraduz. That was his nickname, anyway. Hmm. How's it coming?
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, we're ready to go. You come when you come. Ready? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلينا وسلم وأما بعد. Now to continue, inshallah, one of the people who was sitting here just told me that he had heard that Shem's had a Shafi background. Well, you can find all kinds of stories. But now I'm going to tell you, inshallah, as best as I can, the real story. Who was Shem's? Sheikh Abdul Rashid, in his talk, bypassed it very quickly. He said he was the son of an Ismaili. I think that's what he said. I may not be quoting him correctly, but he alluded to the fact that somehow there was an Ismaili connection to Shem's. Well, it's much more than that. Shem's Tabriz was the son of the 26th Imam Alauddin Muhammad of Alamut, one of the last, the father of the last master of Alamut, who was the brother of Shem's Tabriz, whose name was Rakunuddin Kursha. Rakunuddin Kursha took the waz, or the nas from his father, and he became the imam after Imam Alauddin Muhammad. But Shams Tabriz was one of his sons, and he had a son, Imam Rukunuddin Kursha, whose name was Shamsuddin Muhammad, and in turn Imam Shamsuddin Muhammad, who received the nas from his father, Imam Rukunuddin, had a son called Qasim Shah. And after that, things go behind the satr. They go behind the veil. It's not known. It's known, but it's all veiled. Up until then, this was very much in the open. Now, let me go back a little bit. Remember when I told you about the Fatimiyun? And I explained to you that the Fatimiyun, though people don't know much about them anymore or anything like that, during their time were a hugely successful and openly operating government that stretched all the way from Maghreb to Damascus to Mecca and Medina, all of Sudan, and most of North Africa, including all the Berber areas. I'm not going to tell you the whole history there because this would take too long. But in any case, Mustansir Billah Imam was the last, basically, of these imams. And he had a son. And he gave him the nas. But he was by then a very old man, and he had run into trouble because the army at that time was divided between Turkish contingent and an African contingent of Berbers. When I say African, I should be specific and say Berbers. So there was a Turkish, because they, don't forget, all of Sicily, all of Sardinia, all of southern Greece, Marseille, all of the east coast of Spain, all of the north coast of Africa, all of this belonged to them. Sicily, Malta, Sardinia, Cyprus, all of this was all part of the Fatimid dynasty. This is a very big operation. It's bigger than the United States in size, and equally important in that time. So it's just like, since we're all living in America, if you can imagine a time like 700 years from now, when I would be speaking to somebody and they say, America, well, those were bad people, you know. Well, you could say that. I mean, you know, they invaded all these countries and they killed 3 million people in Vietnam, and they did these things. You could say, yeah, you know, I mean, you could say something about them. But to think of America as not even being in people's minds, it's hard to imagine, right? It'd be very hard to imagine that. Well, equally so, it's very hard to imagine that very few people know much about the Fatimiyun. Out of the people here, how many people are aware of the Fatimiyun? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people, 7 people. Okay. Well, you're more than most. But in any case, they're not very well known. They're the people who started Azhar. They're the people who founded Cairo. And they had a very unique view of things. And that's what's important in understanding what Shams did, because this is his deep background, okay? What's the deep background? The deep background says, Allah says, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. He created the human being in the best of forms, ثُمَّ, and after that, رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا like this. But he created the human being in the best of forms, and they descended to the worst of forms. And you can see that. In other words, the crooks, the gangsters, all of those people, it's like the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, Sahih hadith, he says, everybody was born a Muslim. And only their parents taught them something else. He doesn't say Muslim, he says, what is it that Ibrahim said he was? Hanifa. Everybody was born a Hanifa and Hanif, or a believer. And then their parents, you could say the environment or whatever like that. But everybody was born Muslim. Everybody was born believing in Allah, knowing Allah. You look at a baby and you see a baby, that's the way they are, right? You have a new baby. You smell the back of their necks, you can smell the Jannah, right? It's beautiful. But then you watch them grow up. I have a number of children and grandchildren and so on and so on. And you see some of them turn out good, some of them turn out bad. You know, it's the way it is. Some of them turn out here, some of them turn out there. This is the way it is, you know. And it's your responsibility as a parent to teach them the right. That's your responsibility. But some parents don't do that, because some parents are crooks and some parents are gangsters. And some parents are thugs. And some parents are bad people because they've already asfala safilin, and they raise their children up like that, you know. So that purity that you see in the newborn baby disappears, and they become thuggish. That's like, let's say, the bottom level are the thugs, the murderers, the killers, the corruptors, the people who take graft, the people who do bribery, people who sell drugs, you know, all of those things. That's the asfala safilin. That's the lowest of the low. So people, somehow they can climb up from that. There's a way up from that. Because we see that there are people, or some people never get down to that level. Like you say, they're philosophers, right? They don't believe in God necessarily, but at least they believe, you know, you should be nice to people, or you should be good to people, or you should have morality, or like that. So you could say that's another level up, but they don't believe in Allah, right? Then you have another level up, but they believe in asnam. They have gods. Like, you know, you go to any one of these churches and you'll see this asnam. What's an asnam? An asnam is an idol. You see this big cross and this poor guy hanging on the cross, right? Any church almost you go into, that's what you see. That's an asnam. These are people who worship an idol. We call them Christians, and we try to think good about them. They believe in Allah, but it's kind of mixed up how they see it, right? But they do believe in Allah. But if you go into their things, they're still, when we say that Muhammad ﷺ went into the Kaaba and he destroyed all the asnam, it's the same thing. It would mean you'd have to destroy all of these crucifixes wherever you find them. That's the way it is. And that's eventually what will happen in any case, but people don't know that. But anyway, these are idol worshippers. And so that's another level. But they're believers in, do good, turn the other cheek. They're very good Christian people. When one can, all of us have met good Christian people and know that they're good Christian, good Jewish people, good Buddhist people. But the Buddhists are the people who are killing the Muslims in Burma, for instance. So you can't say all Buddhists are good people, even though Gautama Buddha preached good things. Nevertheless, the people who practice this religion are wholesaling killing Muslims in Burma. So every religion has its good and its bad, but you can say that it's a step up from the killers and the murderers and the thieves and prostitutes and drug dealers and so on and so forth like that form the bottom level, or the asfala safilin, the lowest level of our society. And you can go up and up and up and up and up and up like that, and you can name it. So you come to the top of it. So you say, like I was talking before about the Sheikh of Azhar. He's a great man, knows all of the fiqh. I don't know anything compared to him. He's very, very knowledgeable and everything like that. But yet, you see what happens. You see what happens. You see, like as we talk about, we have the ulama in Iran. It's the same thing. We have ulama all over the world, the same thing. They are supposed to be protecting Islamic values, but they're not protecting Islamic. They're turning the other eye. They're not seeing what's going on. They know what's going on. They're not going to say anything about it, right? So we know that there's people, but they have a lot of knowledge, right? And then there's people, and they call themselves, some of these people, they call themselves Sunnis, and some of these people call themselves Shi'is. Some of these people call themselves Sufis. Some of these people call them Salafis. Some of the people call them Hanafis. Some of them call them Malikis. Some of them call them Shafis. It goes on and on and on and on. These are all religious orders, quote unquote. But they suffer from a sin. What is the sin they suffer from? The sin they suffer from is the sin of shaitan, what you could call the original sin, in a certain sense. Remember back when you think, and you think of what happened. So shaitan, who is a jinn, his name is Iblis. That's his name. The generic name is shaitan. Sometimes we even call kids shaitan because they make trouble and things like that, right? He's a shaitan, right? I mean, that's a generic name of a troublemaker, right? But his name was Iblis, and he was a jinn, and he was a prince of the jinn. And not only that, he fought in a war here on earth, or in some other place, I don't know where, against unbelieving jinn. He was a believing jinn. That's why he was with the angels, because if you remember the Quran ayat, he was there with the angels, right? He was gathered there with the angels. So how come Shaitan was with the angels? Well, he was a prince among the jinn who had fought against the unbelieving jinn in a great world war that encompassed this planet or some planet like it before Adam was created. And he was traveling in the company of the angels and was with Allah, and Allah created Adam. What did he create Adam out of? Clay. Okay? Created Adam out of clay. What are the jinn created out of? Smokeless fire, right? Smokeless fire. You can think of electricity, something like electricity, okay? So he's with him there, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates Adam. And then he blows into Adam, as he did into Maryam. He blows into Adam his ruh. A ruh in Arabic has two meanings. It means spirit, and it also means what makes you go. In other words, when you die, why do you die? You die because the ruh leaves you. The jism is still here. The jasad is here. All that stuff is still here. That's what we bury, that stuff, right? But what's gone? The ruh, the spirit leaves. That which makes me see, do all of this and move like that, that's the ruh. That's what makes this move and do everything, right? Once it's gone, like I recently was with a dead man, and he was so still and so quiet and so cold. I kissed him on his forehead, and it was cold. It's very strange. We're used to kissing one another, and it's warm what you kiss. But the dead person is cold. Stone cold, dead in the market, as they say. That's the way it is. Right? So Allah had blown his ruh into Adam. In other words, he had animated Adam. And then he tells Shaitan, bow down. Make sajda. Iblis is a believer, a deep believer in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he refuses. He says, no, I'm not going to bow down to that. Allah says to him, why are you going to bow down? I told you to bow down. He says, no. He said, you made him from clay and you made me from fire, and I'm better than he is. Ana asan minhum. This is the sin of Shaitan. This is what racism is about. This is what nationalism is about. This is what linguistics is about. This is what religious warfare is about. It's all about, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. I'm black and you're white. I'm brown and you're yellow. I'm from Asia, you're from Africa. I'm from Arabia, you're from Europe. All of these things, all of them, if you boil them all down, is about one thing. I'm better than you because of something, whatever it is you imagine. Skin color, language, region of the world, whatever it is, it's the same thing. It's always the same thing. No matter if you're the biggest sheikh in the world, if you think you're better than somebody else, you're afflicted with the sin of Shaitan. The original sin, I'm better than you. That's what has to go. That's what has to be gotten rid of. I remember listening to Minister Farrakhan speaking one time about just this subject. And he was saying that. He said, this is what has to change in America. If we want America to be really America, this is what has got to change. Nobody is better than anybody else based upon their language, their color, their origin, they're based upon, they're better than other people solely based upon the fact of the good that they do in this world. And even that is, if you think that that's something, that's imaginary, because you don't know, because as the Prophet ﷺ said, my business is not to judge. That's Allah's business to judge. I'm not sent here to judge people. Allah is going to judge all of us. So you can't make that judgment because you don't know. But if you think that you're better than somebody, Shaitan's got you at some level. No matter where you are in this thing, no matter you're the president, no matter you're the king, no matter you're the big sheikh, no matter you're the big ulam alam, no matter what you are, if you think you're better than somebody, you're sick. And that sickness is very important, because as long as you're sick, because Allah says, nothing contains me but the heart of the mu'min, right? Not the Muslim, the mu'min. The Muslim and the mu'min are not the same. The Muslim, one time this desert Bedouin came running to the Prophet and he says, I'm a believer. He says, no, don't say you're a believer. Say that you've surrendered. A Muslim is surrendered. All of us here, we're surrendered people. I assume. We all pray 5 times a day. We fast in the month of Ramadan. We pay our zakat and so on and so on. That entitles us to be called Muslim. We said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. You don't even have to say Muhammad Rasulullah, because he says, Man qala la ilaha illallah, dhakala jannah. Whoever says la ilaha illallah will enter the kingdom. So we're all Muslim in that sense, but we're not all necessarily mu'min. Only you know if you're not or not. And why are you a mu'min? You're a mu'min because you do those things that Allah has said would be good for you to do, like read Quran or make dhikr or get up at night and pray, or like fast on Mondays and Thursdays, or do these things which are called supererogatory or nafil works. Allah says, when you approach me, and you've done the things that I've ordered. I love the things that I've ordered. Of course he loves them. We don't make Allah bigger or smaller by praying to Allah. Allah is what Allah is. He doesn't need us. We need him. He's given us these things to make us better human beings. Okay. But when we approach him, he says, when you approach me with the things that are nafl, the things that are supererogatory, as they say in English, then I love you. I love you. Not I love the acts. I love you. I love you. And when I love you, your hand becomes the hand by which I grasp. Your eyes become the eyes by which I see. Your ears become the ears by which I hear. Your feet become the feet by which I walk. In other words, Allah has entered into you. This is called haqiqah. This is the meaning of haqiqah. In other words, if you have this sin of shaitan in you, 1 ounce of it, 1 milli-ounce of it, of thinking you're better than somebody else, there's no room for Allah. You've got to get rid of that to reach to the point of haqiqah. Because then Allah can't live in a filthy place. Allah is the most pure thing that is. So as long as you have anything like that in your heart, Allah can't come into you. And these hands will just be simply hands. But if Allah is in you, these hands will be the hands by which Allah grasps. And these eyes will be the eyes by which Allah sees. And these ears will be the ears by which Allah hears. Think of this. So these people preach this doctrine. That was their doctrine. It doesn't matter that you're Sunni, a Sufi, a Shi'i, a Salafi, a Takfiri, Wahhabi, a potluck Muslim, whatever you are. It doesn't matter what any of those things. Big sheikh, little sheikh, dishwasher, king. None of that matters. None of that matters. That's not going to give Allah anything at the end of time that's going to make you anything. What makes the difference is the purification of the heart. So all of the efforts of this, why we have this religion, is to enable us to purify our hearts. This was the basis of the Fatimid doctrine. This was why people say it's bad and threatening like this, because it threatens all of those vested interests that says, oh, I can kill you because I'm a Shia and you're a Sunni, and it's killing time for Sunnis in the south of Iraq. I'm a Sunni, I can kill you because it's killing time for Sunnis in the north of Iraq, right? That's what's going on today, right? Isn't that what's going on? How can they justify in the month of Muharram killing each other? Because they think they're better than each other. Because I'm this and I'm that and you're this and he's that and this is that and so on and so on and so forth. And this is all filth. From start to finish, it's filth. I'm Pakistani, I'm Indian. Oh, Pakistani, Indian. What is that? It's a line that the British drew on a map. That's all it is. There's no such thing called Pakistan and India. There are no lines on the maps. The Americans make a big fence between, they talk about the German, there's a huge fence between Mexico and America. There's no fence between Canada and America. It's because those people are brown. That's all it is. You're brown, get down. They put up a fence. If you're white, you're all right. If you're black, get back. Right? That's the way they are. That's the whole thing. And all of this is shaitan. It's all shaitan. And this has to be proclaimed by Barack Obama and George Bush. They have to get together and hold their hands and stand up there in front of the American people on television, and whoever, Caesar, whatever, Chavez, and like this, stand up and say, this is what's wrong, folks. It's wrong and it's got to stop. That's just on a political level. That's what's got to change. And you know how big a change that's going to have to be. We're not even at the beginning of it yet. It's been hundreds of years and we're not at the beginning of it yet. But that's what has to happen. That's what's got to go on. These people understood this. So I don't know how they understood this, but they understood this. And they made that this is the deen. This is Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. I did not send you save as a mercy for all creation. All creation. That's Islam. That's the Sunnah. Not like, right foot, left it up with this. Yeah, all those things, that's all important. But none of it is as important as being merciful to all creatures, all beings, all human beings, everybody. Rahmatul lil Alameen means mercy to all of the world, all of the world. Everything. That's what they were teaching. And as you can imagine, that's why they got a bad name. Because everybody wants to think they're better than other people. They want to take one of these things and they want to say, I'm better than you are. And not only that, because I'm better than you, I can kill you. I can steal from you. I can rape your women. I can steal your money. I can do any of these things because I'm a Sunni and you're a Shi'i. And Shi'is are dogs. Sufis are dogs. Salafis are dogs. The Sufis think the Salafis are dogs. Salafis think the Sufis are dogs. They each think that they're better than each. It's shaitan, shaitan, shaitan. Okay? So this was the doctrine. With this last mustansir, this had to be put down. And it was put down by a manipulation of there's three things that are important to people: the media, money, and the military. These are the three sources in any civilization or culture that cause the thing. The people who talk a lot, who can change the way people think, that's the media. The people who can kill people are, why can these people from Europe come around with guns and shoot these other people? Or what happened down in St. Louis? How did that happen? How come some people got guns and some people don't got guns? You remember after the Korean War, there was a guy in Alabama, African-American guy in Alabama. He was tired of what was going on. And he had been in the Korean War and he was an expert marksman. And he gathered together a bunch of African-Americans in the place where he lived because the Ku Klux Klan was there. And he armed them all and he taught them all how to shoot. And boy, I tell you, the activity of the Ku Klux Klan went down very, very quickly, right? Because they had guns. They said, you come for us, we'll get you, right? That's the way it works, right? But if you don't have guns, what can you do? Throw rocks? That's what they do in Palestine. Now they want to give you 20 years for throwing a rock, right? So that's how desperate they are. They present themselves as being very big, but they're actually very desperate now. In any case, this is what these people were about. And this is what they taught until finally there was this argument between the military. They brought a Palestinian general in and he was going to kind of make peace. Palestinian general had a beautiful daughter. The imam at the time had two wives. The second wife had another son. And the general wanted power, so he got his daughter to seduce the other son by another wife, right? So that father would name him to be the imam. And he put the other imam in prison in Alexandria, and he had a son. And this son managed to get away. And who took him in but Hassan Sabah? And he lived in a place near to Alamut, in one of the castles there. And 1, 2, 3, they were behind the veil. And then it came out again, and they came out into the open again. And they keep going back and forth. But they had a living imam. What do we mean by that? We mean, as I've told the people who were here who know what I'm talking about, if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting here and I ask him a question and he gives me an answer, is there somebody else? Can I go to him and ask him and say, well, what about that? Is there a second answer? Do I need a second answer if I can ask the Rasul? Huh? Alayhi salatu wasalam? I don't need a second answer. I only need one answer. Right? Does divorce consist of saying talak, 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 and you're divorced? Or does it consist of spending 3 months like the Shafi? That's what the Hanafis say. spending 3 months, like the Shafis say, talking it over and trying to work it out. Both of those people who are divorced are equally divorced in accord with Islam. But how could they both be right? They can't both be right. They can't. Over little things, yes, that's a big thing, right? But now we have nobody to ask, because if we go to the Shafi, he'll tell us this, and we go to the Hanafi, he'll tell us that, right? Can you marry for a period of time and not be married, like muta? You know, I said, no, the Sunnis say no, muta. Umar put an end to that. There's no more muta. The Shias say no, there's muta. Who's right? Now here's Rasulullah sitting here, and I ask him, which is right? Yeah, Sayyidi, you tell me. He tells me that's the answer, finished. There is no second opinion, third opinion, fourth opinion. But he died. But he didn't leave us alone. He left somebody who was going to be his representative. That's what an imam is. And he says, whose wali I am? Ali is his wali. So we belong to the school of Ali. That's what the school we belong to is. We're not Sunnis, we're not Shias, we're Sufis. And Ali is our teacher, and the one who came after him and came after him. Because when my sheikh was alive, I need an answer. I don't go to 150 other people. I go to him and he tells me. I trust him to the point where he tells me the truth, and that's the truth. I don't need to go to somebody else. So this is that's called authority. For them, they had a living imam. For the Ithnashri Shi, they're finished. They go to 11 to say the Imam Askari, and then he has a son, but his son goes into seclusion or occlusion. But they have nobody to ask. That's why, what's his name? Their great leader in the last period of time. Who? What? Khomeini. He made the Wilayat al-Faqih. He makes the best, smartest of us. He will be the man that we can ask in the end, right? But that's a poor thing because he's just a guy. He's not masum. He's not in that position. He's not in that position. So everybody, all the Muslims today are lost because we don't know who to ask to find out the truth. Unless we're lucky enough to find somebody who knows the truth. These people maintained this line. And so how did they teach? When they came and they started Cairo, they made places for the Shafis to teach, and the Hanafis to teach, and the Malikis to teach, and the Hanbalis to teach, and the Shia to teach. We teach anything. Everybody's free to teach. You can teach. Teach, brother. Make it clear. Okay? You like it like this, you like it like that. And the Imam's alive. And every week he gives his man who's going to lead the prayers, he tells him, okay, this week we're going to talk about this. This is what we're going to talk about. And he lets him go out there and talk about it. So you go to Jummah prayer, and you get the usual, 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and people sitting there like, that's the majority of people. That's the way they are, right? Okay, fine. So Salat is finished, and all the guys that want to go outside and have a smoke or blah, 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 or what like that, they go out and do that, like that. But some people want to know more. That's not enough. 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 35 minutes. That's not enough for us. So we have another period. It's called Ta'aleem. And this Ta'aleem goes from then until Asr, like we just did. And we talk about things more. With the man who's the Hujjah, that means the proof of the Imam, the Hujjah. And then we reach Asr and we pray Asr, and then we go to another place. And we go to this other place, and the Imam speaks to us. And he tells us what's what. So that's a Friday. That's how a Friday used to be in the time of the Fatimis. So it created, a different kind of society, a very different kind of society. But that society was finally destroyed by a Palestinian general who had a beautiful daughter who seduced an ignorant, well, I can't say that, but a young man. and convinced the father, who was in his dotage, to make him the imam after him, because the other guy had been put in prison and they thought killed, and his children killed, and there was nothing left of him, but one got away. So this teaching continued. I don't care about the people, really. I made a mistake in how I assigned. That's what I'm talking about. Shem's here. That's what I'm talking about. Because he was one, he grew up in that household. He grew up in the household of Imam Alauddin Muhammad, and that's what he learned. You won't find it in that book. That's what he learned. That's what he understood. And they have a way. How does it work? Okay. Let's talk about something. You all know about 911. You ever heard of 911? You believe it? You believe it? Some people believe it. I have a good friend believe it. I drove by the Pentagon 3 days after 911. I looked, there's a hole in the wall. And that hole was like maybe 2 of me wide. And they tell us that a plane, a plane is a lot wider than 2 of me, like this, right? Flew into that building, and the plane's got a tail. And that tail sticks 20, 30 feet up in the air, right? And it's got wings. Whoa. And they're really long. And all you see there is a hole. A thing like that. That's 2, 3 days later. That's all that's there. So you say, whoa, you know, like, and you look at the lamps, and none of the lampposts have been knocked down. None of the trees have been knocked down. They tell you, knocked down. They tell you a plane came from 23,000 feet and made a beautiful spiral curve and came in at ground level and smacked into that building. Now, planes have engines, right? And the engines hang under the wings, right? And the engines are made of titanium. And titanium is the strongest metal in the world. And there's not a trace of it. And there's no gouges in the earth that these engines would have been made. Nothing. So you think to yourself, you've seen, for 3 days, you've been watching TV, and they show you these planes flying in the, say, no, somebody's not telling the truth here. That thing didn't happen that way. Once that happens to you, your mind is changed. And once it happens to you, and they tell you, oh, these buildings fell down because the steel melted. And then you read a report of the Society of Engineers, and they tell you, you know, planes fly on basically high-grade kerosene. You can burn kerosene till the end of time, and it's never going to melt steel because kerosene doesn't burn at a temperature which any engineer can tell you is not a temperature that kerosene burns at. So it never melted those things, and that isn't what happened. So when I tell you that, you're either going to believe me or not believe me. I tell you, go look it up for yourself. It's there on the internet. You can find lots of things. Believe what you want. I don't care. But once you connect with me and you understand that what I'm telling you is true, I don't know the reasons behind it and all of that, but I know that no kerosene made those buildings melt and the steel fall down. It didn't happen. It's a lie. So once I find that my government is lying to me, the way that I look at my government is always different. Like the Germans. The Germans were told that their capital, which was called the Reichstag, was burned down by communists and Jews, right? Well, by the time passed, they found out, no, it wasn't burnt down. They burnt it down themselves because they wanted to get the communists and the Jews, right? That's called casus belli, the cause of making war. You know the Gulf of Tonkin? The Gulf of Tonkin, you heard where the Vietnamese attacked one of our destroyers. Never happened. Never happened. But it was a casus belli for Johnson to wage real war against the Vietnamese, which resulted in 3 million people being killed. They're yellow people, so what does it matter, right? And their land was polluted, and their children have cancers and all kinds of things as a result of Agent Orange being put on their land. Till today. But they had to have an excuse. 911 was an excuse for people to do what they wanted to do. And they wrote about it in 1996, what they were going to do, which was to destroy the Islamic world. They don't want the oil. They don't want anything. They wanted to make it to the point where they have no power. Because you look at the pictures of Syria today, it's going to take them 30, 40 years to restore that country. You look at Iraq. My teacher went to Iraq. He said it was amazing, you know, like everything worked. You know, he's come from Egypt. Egypt, nothing works in Egypt really well, you know, it kind of works. But here were bridges and cars moving up. You look at the pictures of Tehran. Anybody seen movie pictures of Tehran? It looks like Hollywood. It looks like LA. They don't want to become the kings of Iran. They want to destroy Iran so that the people's minds for 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, 50 years from now, are taken with rebuilding it. And they're not going to be a problem. Okay. Once I tell you that, your mind, and it goes into your mind, and you think that I might be telling you the truth, your mind is changed. I've changed your mind. My name is Mukassir. I'm a destroyer. I'm a breaker of people's minds. I'm a breaker of your mind. Because that's the first step in coming to the truth. That the picture that you have formed must be destroyed. It's what Lewis Carroll wrote in Alice in Wonderland. He went down the rabbit hole. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Lewis Carroll, but that's what happened to this girl, Alice. She fell down the rabbit hole and she came to a different world, another world. Things look differently. This is what Shams Tabriz grew up on. He knew this. And then, so I destroy your mind. But what next? Then you say, well, you know, well, what else? So there's another guy who knows more than I know. I'm a little guy. I'm just a breaker. There's another guy, he knows more than I know. It's all in the book, you know, all the names of these guys, right? And this guy can give you, he can put you more into the picture. He said, you think that's something? Let me tell you about this. And let me tell you about that. And let me tell you about this. And let me tell you about that. And let me tell you about the other thing. And now pretty soon, wow, there's like 15, 20 things floating around in your mind, which the world doesn't look like it used to look. And once you understand that slavery is not over in America, that it still exists. There's guys, I used to work in the prisons, they make 42 cents a day making mail bags. 42 cents a day. And 67% of them are African Americans. 42 cents a day. Why? Because you have a choice in prison in the Commonwealth. You can either stay in your cell all day long, you get nothing. Or you can go to work. So 42 cents a day, that's not very good wages. No, but once you go to work, you're charged for your room and board. Because the state's putting, costs the state $21,000 a year to put a man in prison. So now when I put you to making license plates or mail bags or things like that, right, I'm going to charge you room and board. I'm going to charge you for your food. I'm going to charge you for the roof above your head, right? And when all that's paid, and the taxes, by the way, are paid, you can get Social Security on it later. You know, you make, for your hand, 42 cents a day. So you can buy a pack of cigarettes like once a week, maybe, or something. I mean, chump change, as they say. That's what it is. Nothing. Slavery exists in America. It exists. And once you see that, and once you know that, or you say, we're here to bring peace and restore democracy and everything like that. Where? I saw that woman, Hillary Clinton. She's talking to, what's his name? The leader of Syria. No, Bashar. And she says, you got hands and you got blood on your hands. She's, you know, making a dramatic thing. Mr. Assad, you have blood on your hands. And she's standing up to her waist in blood. How many people did, you know, Hassan, what's his name, Takridi guy, what's his name? What? Saddam Takridi. I won't call him. His name was not Hussein. He did that to fool the Shias that lived in his country, right? His name is, what? Saddam Takridi, right? He killed those people with poison weapons, those people, the Kurdish people up in the north, right? But count the people in the time that he was there and that he killed, and count the people that have died as a result of our invasion. There's an imbalance there. There's an imbalance. And you can't deny that there's an imbalance. So once you understand that, your view is different. And once you understand that though this man is called the Sheikh of Azhar and this man is called the Mufti of Egypt, if they don't say anything, because as Muslims they have to tell you that this guy is a crook, he's a thief, he's a thug, no matter he's got a tie and a suit and everything else like that, he looks sharp and everything like that, you know, but he's a thug. If they don't tell you that, they're lying to us. And they are the most trusted of our people, the highest ulama that there are in the land, in that Egypt land. But the same in the Iran land, the same, as I said, in Pakistan land, and every other land, the same. So as Muslims, we're all being lied to all the time. The truth isn't in front of us. But some of us find out the truth. And some of us, when we find out the truth, we pick up guns. Because that's the only way to solve the problem. That's not the only way to solve the problem. You only become part of the problem. There's another way. There's another way. And that's who Shams at-Tabriz was. That's what he knew. He was, as in his position, he grew up in that household, in the household of the Imam, like Sidna Ali, Sidna Ali and Sidna Hassan and Sidna Hussein, peace be upon them. You know, they grew up in the household of the Prophet. Their minds were different. When you grew up with them, and you imagine sitting every day with the Prophet, you imagine that? I mean, it got to change you. It's got to change you as a human being. Because this is the khair khalq Allah, the best of Allah's creation. And if you sit with that, something of that rubs off on you. Something rubs off on you. And so these people, they had invented a system, these Fatimi people had invented a system of people at every step of the way up to the Imam, and below him the Hujjah, and below him the Bab, because these are not subject to fixation. These are divinely appointed offices. But the ones below them, all of these various people, you know, they called places islands, Jazeera, and then this island and the other island. What do we say here? We have here again in this, you know, these people. I don't have it. Anyway, in these different islands, you know, there were, let's say, the Central Asian island, right? Like you got to talk to people in Central. There's the Persian island, right? There's the Arab island, right? There's the African island, right? There's the Oriental island. Each of these is a mentality. Like the mentality of the people of Central Asia is not the same mentality as the mentality of the Arabs. Is that right? You know Arabs, right? You're Central Asian, right? You know there's a difference between you, right? So the way I talk to him is different than the way I talk to him. You guys are families are from Southeast Asia, from India, right? Indians and Arabs have the same way of thinking? No, they don't. So when I want to work on this and how to change people and like that, I have to know how to talk to you, which may be different than how I talk to you. And that may be different than how I talk to you as African-American people. It's different, not better, worse, or anything else, but your minds think in different ways. I talk to him, he's a Persian. Persians are different than Arabs, right or wrong? Right. So they had worked out a system whereby all of these things were connected. And each one was one above the other, above the other, above the other, above the other, and so on. So it's all in the book, the names of these things. But I want you to understand the principle. And the principle is that if I want to change the world, I'm not going to change the world with guns. Because if I try to change the world with guns, look at the communism is a good thing. There are many good things about communism. 1%, 84 people control 90% of the world's wealth. 84 people. That's as much people as could fit on a double-decker bus in England. They control 90% of the world's wealth. 90%. How come? Are they so smart or so industrious, or what is it that gets them to that position? Why are there people who are living below the poverty line, even with food stamps, and can't get enough to feed their children and feed their children when they do with junk food, which is coming from stores where the price of them, the junk food is more than it is in a white neighborhood? Why? Why is that? That's wrong. Is that right? No, I mean, is that the right thing? Is that the way things should be? No, that's not the way things should be. How are we going to change it? This is the question. How, because this is not an abstract thing. This is a reality for a lot of people. How do we change this? And the way we change that is like this way. Clean your heart, people. Clean your hearts. Make this pure. Because nothing can stop Allah. Nothing can stop Allah. Allahu ala kulli shayin qadir. Allah has power over everything. And when there's enough people with pure hearts, everything can be changed. So what we concentrate upon in this school is the changing of hearts. And not only the changing of hearts, that's step one. Step two is to cause you to realize that your heart has been changed and that Allah is with you and that your hand, whether it's opened or closed, is the hand of Allah. And who can stop that? This is the most powerful system. And that's why everybody is against it, because that's the end of the way things are as they are. And they may say, oh, this is very spiritual. No, it's not spiritual. It means that people, what you have to do, as Allah says, one time these people came to Imam Jafar, alayhi salam, and they wanted to make war, and they wanted to, bring about the return of the Mahdi and everything like that. And he was, standing there, and he was sitting there, and he picked up his foot like this, and he hit his foot like this. And people said, what? And he picked up his foot, and he hit his foot like that. And he said, what do you mean, Imam? He says, I mean, you think somebody's going to come and clean up everything, all the filth around us? There's nobody going to come and clean up the filth around us. There's no Redeemer who's going to come and clean up the filth. You got to clean up the filth. You made the filth. Clean it up. Allah does not change a people until they change themselves. That's the message. Allah does not change a people until they change themselves. So unless you change yourself, and that's not baloney or BS as they call it, and it's not anything like that. It's real. It means that you got to change yourself. And in order to do that, you have to find somebody who can help you to change yourself and take you step by step by step so you can see how to work together with other people, how the people of Central Asia can work together, how the people of Iran can work together, how the people of Southeast Asia can work together, and how the people of America can work together, so that we all understand that we can have, as again, listening to Minister Farrakhan one time, he was saying, we have to have a congressional, what did they call it when they had a congressional, not a congressional,
Continental Congress.
a Congress, not a Congress, it was called, what?
Was it Congress?
No, it was not like that. It was like a continental something. Huh?
Continental Congress.
Continental Congress of people to sit together and say, look, these people are talking about nothing. These boners and all those people, they're talking about nothing, right? These are the problems that are confronting us. We are living in a fascist oligarchy at the present time here in America. I grew up here, and I've seen it change before my eyes. This is not the America that I grew up in, I was born into. we are living right now in a police state. Everybody in this room is known. Your social security cards are known. Everybody who is here today is known. They know who you are. They can read your mail. They can kill you without having, like what happened to Aulaki. They can kill you without having a trial. Whether you're guilty, there's no court that found Aulaki guilty. He's an American citizen. He was born here, I forget, in some very American state, Kansas or something like that. But they killed him. Huh? What? Texas. They killed him. And they killed his son. How can that happen? We're supposed to be able to go to court, right? I mean, we're supposed to be able to be judged. You know, are we right or are we wrong? If we're wrong, well, that's the way it goes. And you take your, you know, what they give you, right? But that's it's not like that anymore. And we have to realize that, and we have to know what the truth is, and that truth is connected, like I say, money, the media, and the military. These three things, what Eisenhower warned about, is what's happened. You saw what happened down in St. Louis. You saw those people. You know, this is a town where 85–90% of the people are African American. The mayor is white, all the police are white, and that's that. Why? What's going on here? Well, the black people don't vote. Well, why don't they vote? Well, guess why, right? So this is the situation. You saw them there. They were in the same gear, dressed in the same gear as the soldiers in Iraq was. That's called, we're not supposed to, we have posse comitas in America. There's no military in America. The National Guard is simply here to, you know, help in certain times. This was military facing citizens armed like in Iraq. I was going through your city, Farmville, 2-3 months ago, past the police station. You know, it's on the left-hand side when you're driving to town. I saw one of those military trucks, those armored cars. I mean, heavy duty business. Which said on the side of it, Farmville Police. Whoa, what? Farmville Police? What do the police in Farmville need, you know, this armored car for? So this is what this is about. This is why we're talking about this Shamsuddin. He changed this man who was a certain way into somebody else who became a force of liberation, let's say, in the world, even if only psychological liberation or something else like that. But he caused liberation in this person because he understood the truth about our situation. And he explained to him, what you got to do, Rumi, is it don't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who your dad was. It doesn't matter who your granddad was. It doesn't matter all of these things or anything about it. And those were good men. What you have to do is you still think that you're somebody. You ain't nobody. And I ain't nobody. And none of us are nobody. We're just people. And what we will be judged by Allah, is the purity of our hearts. And all the money in the world, you can't take it to the grave. All the cars in the world, you can't take it to the grave. Everything, houses, sexy wives, all of this stuff, you can't take that you can't go to the grave with that. You go to the grave by yourself. And you stand in front of Allah by yourself. And what Allah looked for, He wanted to see, what is your heart like? So we need people who can help us clean our hearts. That's what we need. And we need people who can talk to us in our language so that we understand what it means. Because if I gave this talk to somebody in, I don't know, how do you think this would go over in Senegal? You think I'd make much headway? I don't think so. But there was a great man who came to Senegal who made great headway along the same lines. Who was that? Ahmed Bamba. He brought about a change in people. And there are other people, Ahmed Danfodio. I mean, there are people all over the world who brought about it. Gandhiji, he brought about a change in people. This is what has to happen. And this is what this is all about. This is, yes, it's a story of Shams and Rumi and poetry and all that. That's not what I'm about. What I'm about is trying to explain what has to happen, what we have to do. And that's not something I can do for you or you can do for me. Or you can do for me or I can do for you. You have to change yourself. I can give you the tools. And that's what Shams provided for Rumi, were the tools and the explanations by which he could change himself. He still went on to be whatever it was that he was, but he was a different man. And this would have to happen. This would have to go on. So, I could go on and on about all of this, and, I don't know, I could really tell you much more than that, all to tell you, that, as he says, Allah says in Surah Baqarah, I could have willed you to be a community of the middle way so that you could bear witness to the truth. This is the thing. How to be this? Does this mean that you give up everything and you do this and you don't do that? Does it mean that this Rumi stops praying? He stops fasting? He stops that? No, he doesn't stop that. Yes, he can write. He can be an ecstatic poet. Yes, no problem. What he says, a middle nation, a people of the middle way. That means, yes, there is a deen, and yes, there is the outer, and yes, there is the inner. And both of these have to be together in us. We don't suddenly magically don't have to do that anymore. We still have to do that. That's where some people go astray, and the other people go astray the other way. You have to balance these things out. This is what it is. So I don't know. I mean, I could go on with this, but I've really told you the truth. As much as I know the truth, using this as something to hang it on, like hanging a suit on a hanger, I mean, the story of Shams and Rumi. It's just a pretense, a pretext, or something like that to tell you this other thing. This is what has to happen. Hopefully today, some of this, can understand what I'm talking about. I pray you do. Because things look very desperate at this point. That's why I told, Baji, I told Hajinu, I'm losing my mind. I see if you see what's happening in front of you, like I saw those things in St. Louis, I couldn't believe what I saw. Couldn't believe it. How? Why? And what can we do about it? Just never mind and go about our ways and forget about it. So I don't know what he says. I got off the point. Maybe there's one other thing I didn't explain about, and I need to explain. It's important to understand. This is the difference between what we can call positive religion. I think that's what we called it, positive religion. And a religion, if you want to call it like that, as such. Where's my book bag? Can somebody get my book bag, please? I have it written down. I don't remember everything. I forget a lot of things. I think it's in here. Inshallah, it's in here. Yes. It's in here. This is what we can call it. A personal religion of mystical salvation. Does that mean you stop praying, fasting, or you keep doing that? You do all of those things and more. You do all of the nafil. But this thing is a personal understanding that you arrive at. Where the problem that the Sunnis face is that they have never gone beyond Nubuwah in their understanding. Nubuwah means the revelation of Allah, right? Nabi, Nubuwa, right? Where's the Musaf? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a Musaf, meaning the writing in this consists of the message that was delivered to Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam by the angel Jibreel alayhi salam from Allah, with the exception of a few ayat that Allah directly gave to the Prophet alayhi salam. Everybody knows that that's what this is, right? You know what this is, right? What language is it written in? Arabic. Who here understands, can open this book? First of all, who here can open this book and read it in Arabic? How many? A few. Who of those people who raise their hand know what it means? None of us. There's nobody here. Everybody here is Muslim. I've been a Muslim for 50 years, right? I don't know what it says. I don't know what it says. I know bits and pieces of what it says, but I don't know what it says. I don't know the meaning of the words I read. I read 2 hours of Quran every day. I don't know what I'm reading. I don't know what it means. And you don't either. We revere it because we know that these are the words that came from Allah to Jibreel alayhi salam, to the Prophet sallallahu salam. This is called Nubuwah. This is what Umar was said, well, we have the book, what do we need the family for? Right? Because if you look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never left people alone. And I'm sorry, I apologize to people who've heard this line before, but I have to do it because there's other people who are watching. So bear with me. None of us here, and that includes people with PhDs, people who've been Muslims for many, many years, people who are sincere, a young man who is growing up to be studying Islam, good people. But none of us know what's written in this, the meaning of what's written in this book, except we read it by translation, which is, he's, like I told you about gay 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, meant one thing, and gay today means another thing. Yes or no? Yes? Words change. So translations, there's a very famous translation which says, if you disagree with your wife, smack her, hit her. Right? Everybody, it's I forget what number it is, 434. I'm sorry, I can't be sure of that. You all heard that ayat, especially women, right? If your husband doesn't like you, he can hit you, right? It says daraba alayha in Arabic. Daraba alayha in a logat al-Arabiya means hitter. But the Prophet ﷺ was sent to live among the Bedouin. Why was he sent to live among the Bedouin? So he would learn lisan al-Arabiya, the tongue of the Arab, which uses words in certain ways. When two camels make love, it's called huwa daraba alayha. Same words. So you could say, if you have an argument with your wife, don't hit her, make love to her. That's a very different way of looking at things than hitting her, isn't it? Would you agree to that, women and men? Very different way of looking at it. But people routinely smack us Muslims and say, look, so you're hitting women. But really it says, make love to her. Very different idea, right? But you wouldn't know that. You never heard that before, probably, except those people who come to classes with me and so on and so forth. You don't know that it means that. And even only you know that I say that it means that, but you go look it up and go find, look at about Lisan al-Arabi and find this word darab. Darab means that. That's what it means, literally. Smack something. But in the way that people use words and change words around in the language, in the tongue of the Arab people, this actually meant make love. A very different meaning. This is an explanation. I have given you an explanation of something. I've explained something to you. that you didn't know before. So you go, how many people went to Taraweeh? Most people. Did you understand anything that was being said by the Imam when he read the entire Quran? Did you understand anything? A little bit, a few words here and there. That's about it, right? It just was like, could you stand there and endure standing there for all that hour, an hour and a half without knowing what was being said? That's crazy. That's crazy. So you have two choices. I was faced with this when I was a young Muslim. I went to Mecca to Madrasa Logat al-Arabiya to study Arabic. I could know. I still don't. I don't know. I willingly admit I don't know. And I will never know. At my age, there's no way I'm ever going to know. I know certain words. I know certain surahs. I know what they mean. I read them over and over again just to keep the meaning fresh. But the whole of it, I don't know what it means. If this were a book on astrophysics, about astrophysics, everybody know what astrophysics are? And I gave it to you, and you opened it up, would you know what it meant? Who here knows about astrophysics? Anybody? Nobody. That's what we're left with. We have this book of astrophysics. This book comes from beyond the world. It comes from beyond outer space. It comes from Allah. And we don't know what it means. So how are we going to learn what it means? What do we need? And the Prophet ﷺ is dead. He said, Allah said of him, he's a human. He walks in the marketplace. That means he, like you and I and all of us here, we're going to die. And when he was a prophet in his life and somebody became a Muslim, like somebody like me became a Muslim, or like you became a Muslim, or like you became a Muslim, or like you became a Muslim, he would make sure that he assigned one of the ashab, one of the companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, to stick with you. And if you went back to your tribe, he'd say to this ashab, this sahabi, go with Ben Saad and go back to his town with him and teach him. Because what do you know? We get kids in here all the time. They don't know how to make wudu. They don't know how to, they don't know how to, they kind of know you do this. They don't know what it is. For sajda, where you put your feet, all of these things you didn't know, you don't know. We didn't know paying zakat. You know, we thought we gave zakat. We don't give zakat. We give sadaqah where we pay zakat. All of these things have to be taught. And he made sure, unlike, I didn't have somebody like that who stuck with me and taught me about this and taught me about that. And I had to go find people. I was able to find people, but I didn't know. But he never let that happen. He always made sure that anybody became a Muslim, he would send somebody to teach them. Right? That's the way he was. That's not the world we live in. It's not. So what does it mean? It means he cared enough.